It's time for some New York stories. We begin at Indian Point. The federal government is now investigating last week's transformer fire that shut down a reactor and leaked thousands of gallons of oil into the Hudson River. The nuclear plant, or the third unit there, will not restart until the end of the month. Last night, 400 people attended a meeting in Tarrytown about the plant. A Nuclear Regulatory Commission official said, quote, "Overall, we determined that Indian Point was operated safely, consistent with its license conditions." That's, by the way, focusing on the operating year of 2014. That's also key because the NRC is the entity that decides whether to relicense the place. One license has already expired. Another one is up at the end of this year. We're joined now on the panel by Richard Brodsky, who we've been talking about before. Richard, it says here, is a former New York State Democratic Assemblyman and now a senior fellow at Demos and a professor at NYU. That's you, right? We got you?
All the truth that we can tell.
You've also been a longtime critic of Indian Point and have been working to try to get the plant shut down. Where do you think this stands now, 2 weeks removed from this fire, and given everything that we've seen?
Context. It's not cheaper, it's not safe, and it's not necessary. With that as background, the latest incidents are just another warning. There's been a tendency to focus on Entergy, which owns the plant, has an economic self-interest in running the plant. Put them aside. The real focus should be on the NRC. The NRC has not been doing its job as a regulatory body for 30 years at Indian Point. The plant is old. It does not meet current licensing requirements. It's located in the wrong place. When you get these incidents, it becomes very important to get the truth out. And the real fundamental question is, can you trust the NRC? The investigation of the fires is helpful. The response that Paul Goulet of Riverkeeper and I got to the list of exemptions from fire safety is helpful, but the plant remains an aging, dangerous, and not cheap exercise in silliness.
Let me interrupt you right there, because those are the exemptions that you were referring to, the information that you and Paul Goulet got. Indian Point's received 43 exemptions on fire and safety issues since 1982, 3 of them since Entergy purchased the place in 2000. Those exemptions include a number of things, including fire suppression systems, fire barrier times, the times that it takes the cables, how long they can withstand a fire. We asked Entergy for a statement on this. Jerry Nappy, who is their spokesperson, said an exemption does not equal a waiver, but rather an alternate set of binding requirements that provide at least an equal level of safety. What's your reaction? First of all, what information should we be getting from these exemptions? What's your reaction to Entergy's
Well, they were
statement?
given a secret. That's the first thing to know. That until we actually litigated this was the great secret. Take a quick example. The cables that control safety supposed to have insulation that lasts for an hour. They tested it. It lasted 27 minutes. They didn't make them fix the insulation. They exempted them from it and said it only had to last 24 minutes. That kind of stuff is why there is so little public confidence and why there were real dangers here.
But Entergy says these exemptions don't mean that it's not safe. It means that they can figure out other ways to make it safe that the systems would otherwise.
Sometimes that's true, sometimes it's not. The point of it is, it's all done in secret. We don't know. What happened 2 days ago in getting this list, what Congresswoman Lowy is asking for, is an attempt to open the curtains, shed a little sunlight on this stuff, because it's dangerous and it's unnecessary.
Let me shift over to the November side of the table. You guys have worked for candidates who support Indian Point. I think we've had conversations where you're either agnostic or supportive of Indian Point. Anything that you've heard so far in the aftermath of the transformer fire, the fact that Entergy doesn't know why these transformers keep catching fire, 3 in the last 7 or 8 years?
I think that's a problem. And there were quotes that came out that said, we're not sure why the transformers are exploding or burning. That's certainly a problem. I mean, you can support Indian Point, which I typically do, and also want as much transparency as possible about it. I think Congressman Lowy is right to ask those questions. They better be answered. I mean, this is a nuclear power plant in a very big population area. There's got to be as much information as possible. I tend to think I have taken the NRC's word when they say that the facility is safe, that it's safe. Richard calls that into question.
You've been taking the federal government's word for things?
It's incredible. It's incredible.
You got to be careful, Bill.
On this, some meteorology, some.
On this, you'll do it. On everything else, not so sure. That's, I think, part of the weakness here.
Bill's pretty open-minded, as we've heard.
I grew up in the town right next to Indian Point, so this is something
She's
that
glowing.
was.
Look at
You can read at night without turning on the light.
Well, so
Exactly. It's all
why
about
aren't
balance.
why aren't you, Jessica, asking questions of some of the questions of Indian Point that it seems like so many
Who
critics
said I'm
seem
not?
to be
Who said I'm
asking?
not? I absolutely agree that there should be transparency. I think when you have any nuclear facility, that the government is heavily involved. When I worked in Astorino's office, we went through multiple training exercises, dealing with emergencies. So there should be as much transparency as possible. The public does have a right to know, but to say it's automatically dangerous and it needs to be shut down with no other alternative, I think is reckless.
I didn't say it automatically. I said it because if it's not cheaper, and they don't claim it is, safe, secure, vital. If they thought it was cheaper, they tell you that. But I'm fascinated. You worked in Rob's office. I'm sure you did your professional best. You were in charge, the county executive was in charge of the evacuation plan. Do you think we can evacuate Westchester County in an emergency?
I do, yes.
Okay, and Mr. Nice Guy, what are you going to say?
I've never seen the plan. I
I do. That's
Like,
you
you
shouldn't
If you
be
can clear
like,
9A,
You
I mean,
can't get
do
over
it.
the Tappan
honestly,
Zee
I
Bridge on
think
a
it's a real
Friday.
challenge. I think it's
You can't evacuate it, and the
depends
pretense
what
that
the
you
accident is.
can, the pretense that you can is an example of this protectiveness of these corporate interests while the public interest is at stake. I'm not an ideologue. There's no anti-nuke ideology. Is it cheaper? Is it dangerous? Is it necessary? The answer to those questions, when you look at them hard, is no. And that's the reason that the plant ought to be closed, not because of some knee-jerk reaction.
All right, I'm going to ask that same set of questions about is it cheaper, is it better, about our next topic. The state Senate has just voted to make the 2% property tax cap permanent. That cap is set to expire in about a year. A new report says that the cap has saved New York's taxpayers about $8 billion over the last 3 years. The bill now moves to the Assembly. Sell me on making the tax cap permanent. Why is that a good idea?
It should only be permanent if mandate relief came with it, meaning that they did the property tax cap. It was supposed to come with relief, which with mandates coming down from Albany mandating local spending in schools and municipalities and other districts. So what's happening right now is the cap, as a Republican, we like the cap, we supported the cap. But what's happening is localities are being forced to raise property taxes because Albany's forcing their hands to do it. So Albany is pretending that they're doing something about the property tax cap, about property taxes. What in essence they're doing is forcing municipalities to do the races for them. So it's really not fair what's going on.
Right, and then you look at just right here in Westchester where 85 cents on the dollar of the levy goes just to 9 mandates in Albany. So where does that, it's like squeezing a water balloon, where does it come out otherwise? You cut local services like police, public
That's like
safety,
saying
parks.
because education is a part of the state constitution, it's a state mandate, that's nonsense. The reason there's been no substantial mandate relief is because the state does very little to tell local governments how to provide the service.
Oh, but in,
That's
Medicare and pensions, or Medicaid and pensions,
Wait a minute.
they tell them exactly how to do it.
The notion that a requirement, if you don't like the pension, your public employee costs, hire less people. But the notion that somehow that paying pensions to public employees is a mandate.
You can't with many of them because they're all locked into civil service jobs. It's hard to even lay off people.
The real problem here is that the political system can't control hiring. Did you really say
No,
that?
but a county can't hire somebody and give them a defined contribution plan.
And
They can't do a
Albany
401k with them.
mandates that you
Albany
have
mandates-
certain amount of staff delivering certain
So
services.
you believe that the pension should be voluntary?
I believe that the pension should be defined contribution rather than defined benefit.
I'm jumping. Putting aside the
Just
specific,
like private
putting
sector,
aside the specific details or the specific mandates, why should the state be able to tell a municipality or tell a county, no, you can't raise property taxes any more than this?
They
It's the
can.
equivalent of states' rights on a federal level. You know, the rights kicking and screaming when the federal government tells states what they have to do. Why does Albany get to tell municipalities or counties
Well, there's
what
an
they
override mechanism.
You can override. There's an
Yeah.
override mechanism. You can go over, but you need a 60% vote to overturn it locally. So you can raise taxes 5% if you want, but you need an overwhelming vote.
Go back to the question, which is, should it be made permanent? The answer to that is no, but for reasons that we might actually be able to agree on. You got to have the flexibility to know when something's working and when it isn't working. The people tend to want permanence for the things they like, but sunsets, which used to be a big reform issue, for things they don't like. Either sunsets are a good idea or they're a bad idea. They tend to be a good idea. These things should be revisited regularly. Whether you're ideologically pro-cap or anti-cap is not the question. And
Well,
I
but
don't
they're
think
saying that they've looked at it over the last few years and they show that they think it's working, so they want to extend it. And they want to extend it in perpetuity.
I think 3 years of looking at something this important probably isn't enough. We have sunset provisions in laws that are more important than this.
Should it keep sunsetting every 3 years?
Yes.
I hate to be the cynical one at the table, but
Oh,
9
please.
times out of
There's
10,
4 cynics at the table.
9 times out of 10, the only reason those sunset provisions are inserted into that legislation is so it can be used as a political bargaining chip. So that's why they're put in there most times.
Speaks the truth.
Either at the time of passage or at the
It
time of
used to be
repeal.
that the
Exactly.
reform movement would say sunsets mean you have to revisit it. As the chief cynic, I think you don't extend your reign wide
She
enough.
puts November in the November team, you
In
know?
the free world,
Cold,
there's
dang
no
it.
basis for that. It's a
feels
good
to me,
idea.
This feels to me like the tax equivalent of a mandatory minimum. I mean, it's a mandatory maximum. You can't raise property taxes any more than 2%. And to me, I just think it handcuffs municipalities. You mentioned that there is a way out, that if you get a 60% vote from people who turn out in an election, but people don't want to vote to raise their own taxes. That's why if you left taxes up to people who were, did a referendum all the time, nobody's taxes would ever go up, and sometimes they need to.
Right. I mean, the trouble is the taxes are still going up. They're just not going up through the state function. I mean, if you look in Westchester County, Rob's gone. Estorino has done five budgets where he's either frozen or cut the property tax levy. But property taxes still go up because of all the local pressure. That's coming down
But
from the
he could still
mandates.
do that even if there was no permanent 2% tax cap or even a sunsetted 2% tax cap out of Albany. He could just do
He
that
could,
individually.
but the reason why the tax cap came into place is in the first place is because so many of these counties were raising their taxes every year by double
That's 'cause they
digits.
elected
7%,
people,
8%, yeah.
Republicans and Democrats, who did it. Don't you believe in elections?
Absolutely, I do. But I'm saying the problem is sometimes, yeah, exactly.
Let me hit you with hit you with a Brodsky argument that I've heard him make. Why is it that the counties in New York that have the highest property taxes seem to be the most successful economically? Westchester, Rockland, Suffolk, Nassau, New
It's
York City.
apples and oranges.
they're-
It has nothing to do with it.
They're around New York City, and New York City's got plenty of poverty as well,
Wait.
and Westchester has poverty too.
If these tax levels were causing economic dislocation, as you argue, how would you measure it? The fact that the taxes are highest in the counties that have the most booming economies has to count for something.
The taxes are high in upstate New York like crazy.
No,
Western New York,
they are
they've wiped
nowhere-
it out.
Yes, they are. Proportionally, property taxes proportion to your home value are just as high as what someone in Westchester pays.
First of all, I dispute that, but even if it's true,
Okay.
you're proportionalitying me? I'm talking about what the taxes
Yes,
are.
if your home costs $150,000, if your home is valued at that much, and you're paying $20,000 a year in property taxes, something is very wrong with that equation.
I got to go to a break, unfortunately, to keep the proportionality of the show intact. We're going to take this break, despite what Brodsky says. Up next, President Obama. Well, you knew it was 2-1 when you booked the show. President Obama with an inconvenient truth about climate change, while the president says dealing with it is now a matter of national security.